to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And joining us live from Brooklyn, New York, USA is Katrina Purcell, strategy and operations leader, and she is now running her own consulting firm with early to mid-stage tech companies on efficient growth metrics. Welcome to the show, Katrina.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
You are welcome to the show. You are welcome to India through this online medium. And I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from your insights into this. And not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe, especially young professionals, women in tech, and a lot of people in other industries. So, Katrina, to understand from you, why are you pushing so much about, empowering women into the tech space, changing the game in the industry?
So I think it's sort of a matter of happenstance. I went into media originally in my career. My dad wanted me to be an engineer, but we don't always listen to our parents. So I went into media instead. But on the technical side of media, and I really enjoyed technology. I loved figuring out how things work. I like to play with new things that we would get in the studio. My dad was probably right. I should have been an engineer, but at that time that ship has sailed. And as I was doing it, I felt I was always the only woman. I was the only one. And oftentimes that meant having to really prove myself to get some respect, or it meant being a little lonely. And as I've grown in my career, it's been so important to me that as other women have entered into the field, to really make sure they feel welcome, that they can see a leader, that they can see someone that they can aspire to be. Because unless you see something, sometimes it's hard to imagine that you could actually do it.
Right. Indeed, it is so much necessary for that much of empowerment, that much of support, especially for women in tech. Because I just, few minutes before the show, I just thought of it. Why not look at the statistics for women in tech? And very quickly, I will not be able to share the source where I exactly, but this came up on top of Google. So people, in that backdrop, let me share what I read. It says that, that women in tech in 2023 is 32%. In 1984, it was 35%. It has dropped. Can you believe it? And I thought we were doing much. We should be much ahead. So maybe this is the caveat. Is the disclaimer is please do check these numbers. But this is what I got on top of my Google search. But this is if this is 100% correct, then this is something your efforts are actually in the right direction at the right time, and especially on the leadership role side. It is 28% in 2023, and I thought we are just growing even in that direction. So a lot of things needs to be done, and the alarming figure was that 50% of women leave roles in tech, including leadership roles, by the age of 35. How do you see these figures? As I said, the caveat is I am not 100% sure how true are they, otherwise I would have been able to tell. But these are the latest figures that Google has thrown up. No better person than Google at the moment. So help us understand, how do you see these figures? How do you see your efforts in the backdrop of these figures?
So I do think directionally they're very correct. And I think women are leaving the workforce as a result of the pandemic. Really drove a lot of women out of the workforce because there's an imbalance of who has to take care of the home responsibilities, right? Children couldn't necessarily go to school if they were home. Someone needed to watch them. And oftentimes you'll find that just in the natural way of life, women are the ones who take on those responsibilities. The child is sick, or they need to be, picked up from school. They need to be taken to daycare. And you are seeing, at least in the US, especially in New York, a shift, right, where men are picking up more of that burden. But it still does fall pretty heavily on women, which means that their careers have to be more flexible. And when you have employers that are requiring 5 days a week in the office or requiring certain hours, that makes it more difficult for women to have the flexibility that they need to ensure that they can do a good job at both their work and their home life. And, I think there's no real sense of balance, but there should be a sense of harmony. I was at a Women in Tech talk on Monday, and a woman talked a lot about the sense of harmony, really creating. And at some point, you're going to be focused a lot more on your career. And I think that's why you're seeing more women up until 35. And then at some point, you're going to probably focus a bit more on your family. And that's when those women are dropping off. And the real thing that companies have to figure out is, how do we keep those women in the game? How do we keep them coming to work? How do we keep them advancing in their careers while providing the support that they need to also raise families?
Right, Katrina. So now you are dedicated to advancing women in technology, and you are working mainly with mid-stage tech companies on efficient growth and scaling. Help us understand, how exactly are you doing this? A lot of women will be watching this, listening to this, and trying to understand how exactly they too can get started, even if you are not there to handhold them. But your suggestions, your insights, your direction will certainly leave them a lot of cues to move forward in tech.
Right. So I think the number one important thing is that you can be a woman in tech without actually being an engineer. You can work in the tech field, you can work for tech companies without actually being a hands-on keyboard engineer creating code. So just because you're not an engineer, you shouldn't think of yourself not as a woman in tech. And what I'm doing through my consulting firm is actually working with female-founded companies. And so my goal is really to start to bridge the gap. The numbers that you mentioned around women in tech are sad, but the numbers around women getting funding in tech are even worse. And when you think about not only women but also minorities, it's terrible in the U.S. in terms of the companies that are getting funding. And the sad part there is that it just becomes a lot of the same companies are getting funding. It's part of a club or a clique. And one thing that I think that we as women need to do is create our own clubs and our own cliques. Things might be happening on the golf course, but we can also make things happen for us in situations where we are. And so the biggest thing is creating a network. You can start small. It doesn't have to be a huge network. It doesn't have to be someone who's the CEO of a company in your network. You can start grassroots. I'm part of a few in New York City that are just getting off the ground. And it's so inspiring to be around other women who are at all stages of their career, listen to the challenges they're having, and be able to provide either guidance or ask questions. Have you thought about this? What about that? Finding a good mentor is key. And then for me, I think it was forging my own path. So not having a career ladder that I was going to climb. Starting my own consulting firm was definitely a bit outside the norm in terms of career path. Within my family, my parents both worked for the U.S. government for a long time. And so, I said, I'm going to start my own company. And my parents kind of said, what? And they've been super supportive, but it's partially, sometimes you have to kind of break out of the paths that you know and see around you and really, try something new. And if it fails, but you've learned something. And I think, for women, redefining that relationship with failure is really key to empowering ourselves.
Absolutely. To understand from you, Katrina, because now you are full-fledged into consulting. So I'll come to your company, to understand that part. But what are the practical challenges that women face in their career in tech companies, or even in a wider level, being a person in tech? What is it and how they can tackle with this? You told about that you don't need to be an engineer. That is the qualification part. But what are about those who are already in this particular line, but are facing challenges? And as I said about those figures, that by the age of 35, 50% of them are out into some other field or for whatever reasons.
I think it's because we get tired. We get tired of having to constantly fight.
It is not true. Women are very, very strong, and they actually, this is also a scientific fact, if I may use that. I don't know how to put it, but that you have to explain then that.
Yeah, so I think, a lot of the women in tech events I go to, people say, well, I'm just tired of constantly having to prove myself. I'm tired of constantly having to, to do 150% just to be, recognized.
Okay.
And, you want to blaze the trail. You want to make the world better. You want to have that 1% or 2% difference. But I think sometimes you feel like we should be making more progress than we are. And I do think the pandemic really slid things back a bit. I think we were making a lot more progress prior to that. And I think now we're trying to dig out of that hole that the pandemic created. But I think in general, what I would say is really the self-confidence. And so imposter syndrome is very big with women. And just for some of your listeners who may not know what that is, it's sort of this feeling of that you're going to be found out, that you internally don't have the confidence in your skills, or you internally don't have the confidence that you know what you're doing. And I think that takes a large toll on women. And, you're not going to make it go away entirely. I struggle with it constantly, but it's partially creating frameworks around you, creating that network around you, having a supportive spouse, having supportive family who's going to say, no, you're doing a great job. You know this, you're amazing. Having those cheerleaders in your life, so that when you do run into a situation where maybe you're not taken seriously, or maybe you're called names, or maybe you're not given the project that you deserve to have, that you have the guts and the confidence to step up and say, no, I deserve this, and really owning your space. There are oftentimes, I have a friend who gave me this advice. She said, walk into the room like you're just a mediocre white guy. She said, you'll have all the confidence in the world. It just, women, we tend to kind of say, oh, we make ourselves small. We want to have all the skills before we even apply for a job. Whereas men tend to say, oh, I could do most of that, so I'll just apply. And, we need to have that level of confidence. And I think creating that network helps to do that.
That's an interesting point you made, which where halfway I cut it, but the full thing was that they get tired of proving themselves. And that's the full sentence. They don't get tired, but they get tired of proving themselves. Why is it that they need to prove themselves again and again? And to whom do they need to prove again and again? Because they have been working in the tech industry since long time back. So who is it that is demanding them to prove themselves again? Is it some cabal that has created something, and they want them to prove to them? Or is it that it is just like that, the nature of the industry is such? And if the nature of the industry is such, why don't you stick to your position and fight it out, defend your turf, and own that space? How does to help us understand this? What would you like to tell women, to those women who get tired of proving themselves?
Yeah, I think there are certain companies that have much better atmospheres, right? Where you don't have to constantly prove yourself, where you can come in, you do it once, and then everyone knows that you know what you're doing. And I've been very lucky in my career to be in environments where that is the case, where you work on one project and you're able to hold your own, you're able to ask the right questions, you're able to, get the level of respect and then hold on to that and not lose it. But I think there are certain environments where things are very cutthroat, and where, teams are not designed to necessarily be helping each other. They're designed to only one person gets promoted. And so it becomes a race, and it becomes a way to make yourself look better than the person next to you. And I think that as a whole, younger generations are sort of fighting back against that mentality. They don't like it. Women want to feel passionate about where they're going to work. They want to like the people they work with. They want to feel like they're making a difference. They want to feel like they're contributing. And so I think you're going to see a shift in how companies talk about their mission, and how companies talk about their teams, and how they reward their teams. Because this mentality of only one person can get ahead, or only one person can succeed, just isn't going to work in today's work environments.
Right. Now let's come to your consulting firm. How is it? What exactly does it do so that audience can understand, and also women and other companies also, they can connect with you after understanding what exactly you are. And how are you changing this whole game about women in tech? Because this is such a nice thing, as I said, in the backdrop of the numbers that I just talked about, you know, uh, uh, may your tribe increase. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I think so. I'll start with my consulting firm. And so oftentimes companies in very early stages may not have enough money to have a full-time chief operating officer. And typically the chief operating officer is really dealing with how the company operates internally. So how are departments working together? How are they measuring success? How are they setting a strategy, a 5-year strategy, a 3-year strategy? And so oftentimes what I'll do is what's called a fractional COO. And so that's for companies where I don't want someone full-time or I can't afford someone full-time, but I need the skill set. And so I will do it on a fractional basis, which is not exactly part-time, but it's either project-based or it's a constant sort of monthly interaction with the CEO and his executive team or her executive team. And then I also do fundraising consulting. So right now, the fundraising market in the US in particular has really been what I would call somewhat depressed. Valuations are not as high as they were, and you're not really getting a valuation based now on your vision and your growth at all costs. You actually have to have efficient growth. And that's something that a lot of founders haven't had to do if they started their company in the last 3 or 4 years. And so what I do is work on operational process design to ensure that you're growing, but you're growing effectively, that you're scaling, that you're not just throwing people at problems, that you're thinking about how should your organization be set up? What should your roles and responsibilities look like? And that also comes at what does your exec team look like? And are you getting free ideas? Are you getting ideas from multiple people from different viewpoints? And what does that diversity look like? And it's not really just about women, in my opinion. It's about really creating a better ecosystem. It's about creating better ideas. It's about delivering better products and better services by having those extra voices in the room. And so I think, we can say, oh, we just need to get to a percentage of women. I don't necessarily think it's a percentage. It's probably not 50-50, but I do think it's important that women are making products because we have different problems. We look at the world differently. We experience the world differently. And the way we approach something might be very different than how a white guy would approach it. And so I think that we would probably, and to be fair, in the US, we actually spend most of the money for families, right? We are the consumers. We are the people who are purchasing these services and these products. And we deserve to have them fit our needs, not a standard need set by someone else.
Right. Whatever the situation right now, Katrina, I am very hopeful, optimistic that this situation is going to change. There will be much more equitable distribution of work in the tech industry, especially for women. And not because that women has to just come in, but because women can bring in so much strength to this industry, like any other industry, and that no industry should be deprived of. That's what people need to understand. So whatever the case may be, I leave with this particular episode in the hope that the situation will be much better. In terms of a lot of people who want to connect with you, to know more about you, about your company, and to also engage with you professionally, what's the best way to do that?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me pretty easily. And then my website is KatrinaPurcell.com. And on there, you have a link. You can actually set up time. I love to mentor. So if there are women listening to your podcast that would love to have a conversation, they can reach out through my website and we can set up some time to talk about their career path and what their goals are. And I love to provide support for other women who are trying to make it in the world.
Absolutely. On this positive note, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.